You're lying in bed. The conversation hasn't happened yet, but you've already had it 4 times. You've scripted what you'll say, you've predicted what they'll say back, you've rehearsed your reaction to their reaction, and by the time morning comes, you're exhausted from a conflict that never actually occurred. Everyone calls this overthinking, but what if it's something else entirely?
It starts small. Before a difficult conversation, you mentally run through every possible version. You test different tones, different words. You imagine their face shifting, confusion, anger, withdrawal. You prepare a defense for an accusation that hasn't been made. Then it bleeds into everything. Before a casual dinner, you're pre-playing how you'll respond if someone brings up that topic. Before a work meeting, you've already rehearsed 3 different ways to phrase one sentence and ranked them by how much judgment each one might invite. You cancel plans not because you're tired, but because the rehearsal alone already drained you. Your friends say, stop overthinking it. Your therapist might call it rumination, and you nod because the word seems close enough. But here's the thing, you're not looping on a thought, you're looping on a feeling. You're not analyzing, you're bracing. There's a name for what you're actually doing, and it changes everything once you hear it. You're emotionally rehearsing.
This is not a flaw in your thinking. This is your nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. At some point, likely early in your life, you learned that emotional situations were unpredictable. Maybe a parent's mood shifted without warning. Maybe saying the wrong thing led to silence, withdrawal, or an explosion you couldn't foresee. So your brain made a decision, a brilliant protective decision. If I can't control what happens, I'll simulate it in advance. Every version, every outcome, so nothing catches me off guard. Emotional rehearsal isn't anxiety gone wrong. It's your mind's attempt to make the world emotionally survivable. You're not broken, you are prepared. Excessively, exhaustingly prepared for pain that may never arrive.
Abstract brain animation with 2 glowing regions. Here's what's actually happening inside your brain. Your amygdala, the region responsible for detecting threats, doesn't distinguish well between a real social danger and an imagined one. When you mentally simulate a painful conversation, your amygdala responds as though it's happening right now. Cortisol rises, your chest tightens, your breathing shortens. Your brain is running a fire drill, but it forgot to tell your body it's not a real fire. Visual, fire alarm flashing inside an empty, calm room. There's a concept in neuroscience called predictive processing. Your brain doesn't just react to the world, it constantly generates predictions about what will happen next. It builds models. When those models involve social threat, rejection, judgment, conflict, your brain doesn't wait for evidence. It generates the emotion in advance, so you're ready. Think of it like a stage director. Visual, empty theater stage with a single spotlight. Before the real performance, the director runs full dress rehearsals. Costumes, lighting, emotions, everything at full intensity. Your brain does the same thing. It puts you through the complete emotional experience, the fear, the hurt, the shame, before the actual event, so that if it happens, you've already survived it once inside your mind. The problem is that the rehearsal costs the same energy as the real thing. You're paying the emotional tax on events that may never occur. And here's the deeper layer. This pattern often traces back to what psychologists call insecure attachment. If your early caregivers were unpredictable, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, sometimes explosive, your nervous system learned that people are puzzles that must be solved in advance. Spontaneity became dangerous, reading the room became a survival skill, and emotional rehearsal became your permanent operating mode. Not because you're anxious by nature, but because your environment demanded a profit, and you became one.
So what do you actually do with this? You can't just stop thinking. That's like telling a smoke detector to stop detecting smoke. Instead, you work with the system, not against it. Here are 4 principles, each grounded in how your brain actually operates. 1. Name the rehearsal, not just the thought. When you catch yourself spiraling, don't say, I'm overthinking. Say, I'm emotionally rehearsing right now. Why this matters? Specific labeling, what neuroscientists call affect labeling, activates your prefrontal cortex and reduces amygdala reactivity. A precise name gives your rational brain a handle to grip. Calling it a rehearsal also reminds you that this is a simulation, not reality. Example, you're dreading a conversation with a friend. Instead of following the script in your head, you pause and say, out loud or internally, I'm rehearsing the pain of this conversation so I can survive it, but it hasn't happened yet. That single sentence interrupts the loop.
2. Identify the emotion you're pre-feeling, not the scenario. Visual. Slow zoom on a person's hands resting on a table. Emotional rehearsal disguises itself as problem solving, but underneath every rehearsed scenario is one core emotion you're trying to avoid. Usually it's one of 4: rejection, shame, helplessness, or abandonment. Why this matters? Your brain runs simulations to protect you from a specific feeling. When you name the feeling directly, the simulation loses its purpose. You've already touched what it was trying to shield you from. Example, you're mentally rehearsing a work presentation, not because you're unprepared, but because you're terrified of looking incompetent. The fear isn't about slides, it's about shame. Once you see that clearly, the rehearsal quiets because you've reached the actual nerve. 3. Give your nervous system the ending it never got. Visual, person standing at a window, warm light coming through. Most emotional rehearsals don't have endings, they loop. Your brain keeps running the drill because it doesn't know how to finish the scene. It never learned that conflict can end safely. Why this matters? Completing the stress cycle, a concept from burnout research, tells your nervous system the threat has passed. Without a clear resolution signal, your body stays mobilized indefinitely. What to do? After catching a rehearsal loop, consciously imagine a version where you survive the outcome. Not where it goes perfectly, where it goes badly, and you're still okay afterward. You say the wrong thing, they react poorly, and you walk away intact, breathing, still here. Your brain doesn't need a perfect ending. It needs a survivable one.
4. Shrink the rehearsal window. You don't need to eliminate rehearsal entirely. You need to contain it. Why this matters? Your brain responds well to structured boundaries. Open-ended worry expands to fill all available time. Bounded worry stays manageable. Research on scheduled worry time in cognitive behavioral therapy confirms this. Giving anxiety a defined space paradoxically reduces its grip. Example, allow yourself 10 minutes before a difficult conversation to mentally prepare. Set a timer. When it ends, you stop. You tell your brain, the dress rehearsal is over. Now we perform. Here's the mental model to carry with you. You are not an overthinker. You are a director who never stops running rehearsals, because once, a long time ago, being caught unrehearsed was genuinely dangerous. But you're not in that theater anymore. The lights have changed, the audience has changed, and most of the scenes you're rehearsing will never make it to the stage. Your job now isn't to rehearse less, it's to begin trusting yourself to improvise. There's something deeply human about this. The fact that your brain works this hard, not to protect your body, but to protect your feelings, says something about you. It says you felt things deeply enough to build an entire system around never being blindsided by pain again. That's not weakness. That's a mind that learned too early how much emotional ambush costs. But here's the quiet truth no one tells you. You were never rehearsing for the conversation. You were rehearsing for the pain. And you've already survived more of it than any rehearsal could have prepared you for.